Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Meet Melbourne graduate webinar, where today we're discussing the Master of Computational Biology. This webinar is part of a greater series of graduate webinars that have and will continue to take place at the university over the next 2 weeks. All our webinars are being recorded, and you can view those that you might have missed on our website where you would have registered for this one. So my name's Remy Dovers, and I'm a Student Recruitment Officer within the Faculty of Science, and I'm going to be the moderator of today's webinar. Before we commence this session, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Now, in this online format, that is quite an interesting acknowledgement of country. I'm currently speaking to you from my home in Coburg, upon lands which the elders and descendants of the Wurundjeri people are the traditional custodians. And that's also the same for our Parkville campus as well. Many of you will be tuning in from different areas of Australia and even internationally. So this might be the first time you've heard this type of acknowledgement before. These usually occur before an event or a speech. It's an incredibly important acknowledgement that shows awareness of and respect for the different traditional owners of land in Australia that we meet on. So once again, I thank you all for joining me and for joining our experts today as well. So we have Dr. Jennifer Flegg, who is the Academic Coordinator of the Master of Computational Biology. Jennifer's research focuses on mathematical biology in areas such as wound healing, in tumour growth and infectious disease epidemiology as well. We're also joined by one of our current students, Lucy, who's in her final year of the Master of Computational Biology, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about her experiences in the course. So we're going to begin this webinar with an overview from Jennifer, just about some of the key features of the Masters, and then we'll hear from Lucy as well to tell us a bit about herself and her experience. This is going to hopefully conjure up some questions from you, the audience. So on your screen, you should be able to see a questions option, and this is where you can post your questions to us live throughout the webinar. We'll have a short Q&A towards the end of the session, where I'll be posing some of your questions directly to Jennifer and to Lucy, so do be sure to submit them. If we don't get to your question, rest assured we can get to them afterwards, so please submit them via our website, and myself or one of my colleagues will follow up with you after the event. All right, I think that's it from me for now. I'm going to hand over to you, Jennifer, to talk us through some of the key features of the Master of Computational Biology here at Melbourne.
Thanks, Remy, and welcome everyone. It's good to meet you. So my name's Jennifer Flegg, and I'm from the School of Mathematics and Statistics at the University of Melbourne, and I'm the coordinator of the Masters in Computational Biology, and so that's what I'll be talking to you about today. So firstly, what is computational biology? So computational biology is a rapidly expanding, rapidly growing field at the moment, and it sits at the intersection of 3 different disciplines. Those disciplines are biology, computer science, and mathematics and statistics. And what computational biology really looks at is the application of one or more of mathematical modeling, computational simulation, and data analytics to the study of systems which might be in nature biological, ecological, medical, or epidemiological, and other examples as well, but these are just some of the types of problems that mathematical modeling and computational simulation are applied to within the broad banner of computational biology. And you've probably been made aware quite recently of a lot of important work that's going on in the mathematical and statistical modeling of COVID-19 and the Australian response and responses around the globe to this pandemic. And that is really, in an essence, computational biology. It's looking at a biological problem, the COVID-19 pandemic, and how can we use mathematical modeling and computational simulation to better understand that system. So at the University of Melbourne, computational biology sits across 3 broad themes, and these are statistical genomics, biological dynamics, and quantitative ecology. And I'll talk about each of these 3 briefly, and then I'll talk more about the structure of what the masters would look like. So the first broad theme is statistical genomics, and for those of you who aren't sure what this is, so statistical genomics is a broad field of research, and it looks at the trying to understand biological systems with a focus on genomes. So that is a focus on the genetic material that makes up organisms. And this focus could be at a variety of scales. So it could be looking at molecular systems, cellular systems, could be looking at individual people, the interactions between host and pathogen, interactions between different species, and so on. So at the University of Melbourne, statistical genomics is done by a research group called the Melbourne Integrative Genomics, or MIG. And this is a group of consists of a group of 9 group leaders, and they have expertise across statistical genomics, which allows them to tackle questions related to understanding these types of biological systems related to genomic data. So focusing in on just one person from the Melbourne Integrative Genomics, so MIG, Associate Professor Kim-An Lekau is a member of the School of Mathematics and Statistics, as well as Biosciences. And she is works in the field of computational biology and statistics. And what this means is that her work sits at the interface of statistics applied to modern biology. And modern biology is a field where there are masses and huge amounts of data being generated by high throughput, cutting edge experimental techniques. And this vast amount of data might be related to genes, proteins, microorganisms, or even clinical data. And with this data and an appropriate statistical framework, Kim-An's group looks to understand questions which might be related to stem cell biology, health and medical research, and also ecology. And so by building these statistical models and frameworks, Kim-An's group not only answers the questions that they're interested in, but they also develop software, and it's open access software that is then put out into the research community that other research groups can use to answer their own questions. And Kim-An teaches into several of the statistical genomics subjects within this core theme of computational biology. And one is that, so these are the 2 subjects that Kim-An teaches into in statistical genomics. So the second core theme of the computational biology masters is called biological dynamics. And this is research into a biological problem or a biological system where dynamics is the central unifying feature of the system. And this might be dynamics at a small spatial scale. So for example, I've got 2 simulations here. The first one that you're seeing is looking at individual particles, so on a very small spatial scale and on a small temporal scale, so over a small time simulation. Whereas the one further over to the right is looking obviously at a much larger spatial scale, looking at a continental trends over Africa of a metric which is related to infectious diseases. And also on a very different time scale, so this is on a matter of years and decades rather than just seconds. So biological dynamics encompasses a broad range of spatial and temporal scales. So the Biological Dynamics Research Group sits within the School of Mathematics and Statistics at the University of Melbourne. It consists of 7 group leaders, including myself. And we do a variety of different things. So some of us focus on multicellular systems and multicellular biology, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Whereas some of us look at epidemic modeling, and I'll talk about that as well. But there are a wide variety of different topics that we all focus on. I'll just talk about 2 of those topics now. So the first of the topics that I'll talk about is multicellular systems. So in this, what is the idea is that so work is done looking at a small spatial scale, so looking at cellular systems and how cells interact with each other. So mathematical models for the interaction of 2 different cells are developed, and this gives rise to resulting motion of those cells. We also can develop cells, so models for what happens within a cell, so an intercellular model. And so when we build these types of models, we really have to build them up over multiple scales. So firstly, you might build a model for what's happening within the cell, so looking at, say, cell division. Then you might embed that in a model looking at cell interaction, so what happens in interactions between multiple cells. And then finally, you embed that model within a tissue level model. And so by building these 3 models and embedding them together, you finally get an idea of what's happening on the tissue level scale, which you're most interested in. So this could be, for example, for tumor growth, which is the simulation shown in the top right-hand side. So another example was the animation that played here. So this was is capturing the development of a germline during larval development, and it shows different cells in different states. So that's different phenotypes of cells, and they're undergoing different types of events such as proliferation and migration. So yeah, another area of focus within biological dynamics at the University of Melbourne is epidemic modelling, and many people have probably seen work on this recently in the news. So James McCaw has been leading some of this work. So in recent months, COVID-19, the pandemic has brought the attention of the whole world, really, the role that mathematical modelling can play in understanding and giving key mechanistic insight into a biological system, such as the spread of an infectious disease. And James is within the School of Mathematics and Statistics, and he's had a lead role in guiding the Australian response to the pandemic and informing governments about what they should do and when they should do that. And so some of the things that he's done has been, and him and his team has been to predict case numbers over time of how many COVID cases we can expect, but also really important things like how many ICU beds will we need over time during the pandemic. And this type of modelling, looking at how epidemics spread, has features in a couple of our subjects that we offer within the Master of Computational Biology, which you would get to study if you take this course. So the third and final theme that I want to talk about was quantitative and applied ecology, which is led by a group called QAECO within the School of Biosciences. And what QAECO does is look at the application of quantitative techniques, so maths and statistics, to problems in ecology. And the idea here is that the group is focusing on biodiversity, threats to biodiversity, but also how can they optimize management actions with the aim of informing policies and management strategies. And QAECO consists of a group of 8 group leaders, and I'll just talk about a little bit of their work now. So some of the areas of quantitative ecology that are done within QAECO include species distribution modeling. So this is looking at whether or not we can make predictive mathematical models or statistical models of where a species is and where it isn't, and also looking at the range of a species. So the existence, the abundance, so the presence and absence of a species, and looking to be able to predict that by relating presence and absence data to environmental factors such as rainfall, temperature, and so on. So another key area of research for the QAECO group is looking at spatial prioritization, and this is looking at where within a spatial region should we act in order to meet some objective. So that objective might be, for example, to save a threatened species. And so the map shown here is areas where we should prioritize as very high or down to moderate, whether or not the action should take place in that spatial region. And the way that we do that is by creating a mathematical and statistical model. And finally, so we need to be able, so obviously to be able to make these species distribution models, we need lots of data, but data is very difficult to collect and it's very expensive to collect. So there's work being done in QAECO to look at where we can optimize the design of these surveys. So looking at where and when would be optimal to collect data, and also looking at different ways, novel ways where we can collect data more efficiently. So looking at thermal imaging, drone technology, and DNA that comes from the environment. So Guru is one of the lecturers in the QAECO group, and she teaches some of these techniques that I've just discussed. So those are the 3 main themes of the Master of Computational Biology at the University of Melbourne. But how does this fit into the bigger picture? So if you take a Master of Computational Biology, you'll really get a unique experience that is tailored to the skill set that you bring when you start this master's course. And it gives you the opportunity to build your employment and professional skills. So there's actually required that you take some professional skills as part of this master's, so you get to build that aspect of your career. You also get more than just technical skills. So you get to build relationships with computational biology labs and medical institutes. And gain experience with real world problems. So you don't just get to do coursework, you actually get to do project work. And by doing a project, you get to build connections with industry, and the idea is that hopefully those connections might lead to some employment opportunities. Importantly, we are located in the Parkville campus at the University of Melbourne, and this is really in the heart of the Melbourne Biomedical Precinct. We're surrounded by medical research groups, computational biology labs, research hospitals, and so on. And computational biologists really fill a gap where there isn't currently a lot of people trained. So because you get training across maths and statistics, biology and computer science, you're actually quite uniquely skilled to fill the gap in the job market. So one big advantage of doing the Master of Computational Biology is that you get to create these connections through, for example, through a science and technology internship subject. So this lets you get real-world experience by being placed within a company for a semester, and it allows you to improve your professional skills by building these connections with a company, either that you've chosen for yourself or that the university can help you make that connection. Okay, so that's some of the advantages of doing the Master of Computational Biology, but where does this all sort of fit into 3 years? So exactly what the course plan looks like will depend on the skill set and the training that you bring to the start of the master's program. So depending on whether or not you have a biosciences background, a computer science background, or a statistics background will very much dictate what this course looks like for you across the 3 years. So for example, for someone with a biosciences background, you'll spend most of your first year sort of getting up to date on the computer science and the maths and stats background. If you come in with a computer science background already, then you have to pick up some biology and maths and stats. But apart from sort of filling in the gaps of the background that you don't bring with you, what you do get to do is you get to take these core subjects across these 3 themes, the statistical genomics, the quantitative ecology, and the biological dynamics. So your first year will be filling in gaps, but also building up your capacity across these 3 themes at the University of Melbourne. And the second year looks much the same as that. So you get to build on and take electives that allow you to build and tailor the program to build the knowledge that you want to build. So if you want to focus on statistical genomics, you can build subjects around that, which allow you to come out of the master's really strong in that area, as well as building strength across the other themes as well. Importantly, in the 3rd year, you get an opportunity to take a project in computational biology, and what that looks like depends on it's tailored to the individual student. So it could be an industry-based project, but it could also be a research-based project. So where will this take you? So employment opportunities for someone who has done a Master of Computational Biology are quite varied, but it includes medical research institutes. So this could be places like the WEHI or the Burnett Institute. Both of those are based in Melbourne, but there are institutes like this in every major city. Could be government departments, so like defense departments, health departments, and so on. Research hospitals, so an example would be the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre. Big pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies are always looking for people who are well trained in biology, high performance computing, and statistical methods. So that's exactly what computational biology is. And of course, you can, if you take a research project, then you might be drawn into a university career, either in a university setting or in a public research institution, for example, like CSIRO. So I think that's pretty much it from me. I'm now going to hand over to Lucy, who's going to tell you more about her student experience.
Hi everyone, my name's Lucy. I'm in my last year of my Masters of Computational Biology, my 2nd year, and I came into the degree having graduated a Bachelor of Science at the University of Melbourne in 2016 with a computational biology major. So coming into the Masters, I really had quite a mixed background to begin with, and I knew that I really loved computer science and maths and biology, so it was kind of a natural choice for me. It was either go and sort of pick one, or it was continue on and keep studying all 3. So my year last year, which was my first year of doing the Masters was all coursework based. And so I really sort of touched base with all 3 different areas there. And then this year has been quite exciting because I've started my research project. Jen is supervising me for that, and I've got 2 other lovely supervisors. And my research project is into it's a model of Knowlesy malaria. It's a type of malaria which also involves monkeys as well as humans and mosquitoes. So there's a couple of different things flying around in the model. And my focus is on the spatial distribution of the disease in Southeast Asia. So I'm really loving getting involved in that so far. It's been a fantastic opportunity to use all of the skills that I've sort of built up at the University of Melbourne over the last, 5 years now. So that's been really exciting. One other thing that I did last summer was that I did take the internship opportunity just to do over the summer to keep sort of studying. And I did an internship with the Clinical Outcomes Research unit at the Royal Melbourne Hospital, which is a unit involved in multiple sclerosis research. And I went on board to do a statistics-based project on the neurology workforce. So it had nothing to do with any MS or anything like that. But it was all about workforce modeling, basically. And I was using my skills in dynamics to sort of have a look at the flow of neurologists from one place to another and their progression of their careers and that sort of thing. The internship was a fantastic opportunity because I was invited to go on a statistics course down at Lawn with the rest of the group, and that was really cool. That wasn't something I expected when I signed on, but also it was a really good opportunity to get some sort of practical hands-on skills, because often when you're studying coursework and you're given some data, it's usually pretty clean. And the standout experience of my internship was that my data was not clean at all. And so I had to spend a lot of time sort of getting to know it and going to my supervisor and being like, oh, I'm not sure about this. What is that doing in there? And yeah, so it was pretty raw, like survey data, and that was quite what else have I got to talk about? I'm not sure. Yes, so I think that might be, I think I've covered everything. Remy, have I missed anything?
I think you've covered quite a bit there, and it's definitely given me a few segues into some questions that we're getting, so thank you so much. One of the biggest questions that we get asked by prospective students for this course, and maybe I'll firstly pose it to you, Lucy, to see if you had an experience with this, and then I'll hand over to you, Jennifer, to get your take on it. But did you consider a course that's very similar at the university is the Master of Science Bioinformatics? Was that in your decision making when you were going to do your Masters, and what maybe was the reason why you went over one over the other? Was there particular aspects, or was that just not in your choices at all?
It wasn't really. I wasn't thinking about bioinformatics. I was really at the time quite passionate about like whole organisms, I guess. I was really interested in ecology and really interested in maths, and I didn't necessarily know any of the people in Quaco that I do know now. So the Masters was kind of the obvious choice for me. Yeah, I was tossing up between doing the Masters and applying for a graduate position with a government organisation that I'd done an internship with previously. And I decided to do the Masters because I really felt that I had more to learn before I entered the workforce. Yeah, that would be my answer there.
Yeah, interesting. Jennifer, do you have any sort of key differences that you could highlight between bioinformatics and computational biology for people who might be tossing up between the two?
Yeah, I mean, there are some similarities. And if you look at the course plan, there are some subjects which are in common between the two different master's programs. But I think what is different about the Master of Computational Biology is that you get the experience across those three themes. So bioinformatics is very much connected to statistical genomics. And so the skills that you would pick up in bioinformatics and statistical genomics are quite related, but a Master of Bioinformatics would not allow you to pick up the modeling of biological systems, so like epidemic modeling, multicellular systems, and neither would it let you pick up the quantitative ecology side of things. So it's related but different.
Like a same but different sort of thing.
Yeah.
Great, thank you for that distinction, because that was one that we actually had through the live chat there. So I'm sure that person hopefully has a better idea of why to pick one over the other. One of the other questions that have come through is just regarding the allocation of research projects in this course. So maybe perhaps again, I'll get both of you to talk to it. Jennifer, maybe you can first talk about it on a kind of like back-end administrative way, and then we can get the perspective from Lucy on how it looked on her end.
Sure. So you, as a student in the Master of Computational Biology, you wouldn't be doing a project until your final year. And so in the first year and second year of the program, you'd be able to meet with lecturers, make those connections. And it's through making those connections that you would then find someone whose research that you like and that you get on with. And you then approach them and see if they have a project which they could offer you. So it works in the way that the student it's really on the student to find a project that works for them and for someone, and to make the connection with a supervisor that they want to work with. But that is done facilitated by myself as the coordinator of the program. So if a student is struggling to make those connections, I help the student make those connections. So it's not that you're just left to yourself to find a project, and if you don't find a project, you don't get one. You try and find one yourself by making your own connections, and if you struggle, then you get in touch with me and I help you.
That's really nice to know, especially I think just because you'd have such a clear understanding of the different academics working in different fields. Students mightn't have come across them yet during their program, but you could certainly point them in that direction.
That's right. So, so a student just came to me recently and said, I'm really interested in neuroscience, but I have no idea who's doing anything in that. Can you point me in that direction? So I was able to talk to a few people who knew a few people who, you know, were able to make those connections for the student.
And so, Lucy, you mentioned that Jen is actually your supervisor amongst a couple of other academics. How did you key that up?
Well, I've known Jen since third year of my undergrad, and you know, we sort of had like a 4-week sort of, you lectured me for I think 4 weeks, and it was quite a small class, so I knew her sort of relatively well. And then when it came to sort of locking a project in last year, there was one other topic I think that came up, which was more sort of down the dynamics pathway, and I was sort of not sure about which one to choose, but in the end I sort of went with the one that I'm doing at the moment, which is more sort of ecology based, because that was sort of where I was more interested in going. But the process was very much like so James McCaw sort of came to me and said, you know, there's a couple of topics, we're not sure which one, you know, would suit you and would suit supervisors best, but I think I'm a little bit unique from a typical math student or a typical computing student, because I sort of have touched, so I have a bit of knowledge across the board. So that means that in terms of projects, it's kind of a little bit a bit of a unique situation as an MCB student.
Yeah, interesting. And another question that's come through is about your internship opportunity, Lucy. And similarly, just I guess people are really interested on how that would work. How would you set that up? Did you have to do a lot of research and hunting, and how did you approach potential organizations or companies?
Actually, I actually knew them all beforehand, and I sort of approached them and I was like, oh, can I come and hang out over the summer, basically? And they were like, yeah, we're happy for you to do that, but we can't pay you. And so I thought I would do it through the internship pathway so that I could do it for credit. And the great thing about the internship subject is that while you're doing the internship, you're also doing a bunch of assessments for uni about, you know, sort of reflecting on how you sort of work in the workplace and what your abilities are, and how you can improve as a team member and stuff like that. So it was quite helpful while I was doing the internship to be thinking about that at the same time.
I think your answers to both the research and internship question have also just highlighted how important it is to consider your studies as networking opportunities. So you were clearly already, discussing things with potential supervisors before you even realised it, just by approaching your teachers after class and having discussions with them. That's all part of that networking process, which is so important across both an undergrad and a graduate degree as well. And that's something that I think those, as well as the research project, the industry project that's available in the program, can offer that kind of thing as well. So Jennifer, would you be able to touch on just quickly the option of an industry project in the program as well for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So there's two different types of projects that are available. There's an industry project, which is where you would be based in a company, and what exactly that project looks like very much depends on what that company does and what would be an appropriate for the course. The second option is to do a research project. So the industry project is much smaller, so it's about half the size of the research project. And so the research project really would take, it's really half of your time for a full year in that sense. So it's actually 4 subjects and you do 8 subjects a year. An important distinction is that if you are planning to do a PhD, then you need to do the research project. So the industry-based project is not a pathway to a PhD. So yeah, if that's on the agenda, then you want to be considering the option of a research project.
Perfect. You've also just answered one of the other questions, was, is this course a pathway to a PhD? And so, yeah, you've just answered yes. If you do that research project, it is considered a pathway to a PhD.
That's right. So I think its initial construction is not necessarily as a pathway to a PhD. It's as a professional master's, but it's quite a flexible course, so you can actually tailor it to make that progression if that's what you want.
Fantastic. Lucy, is that something that you're considering after your studies, or are you looking to jump into the workforce? Have you not quite considered it yet?
I mean, I've definitely considered it. I've had thoughts. Yeah, I haven't locked anything in yet, but I'd like to do a PhD, or I'd like to continue sort of working on what I'm working on as a master's student. Yeah, whatever happens, I'm happy.
It's a good indication that you're not yet fatigued by research, so that's good. So another question that we've had pop through is quite simple, and I know that you did cover it a bit, Jennifer, in your presentation, but what does a computational biologist actually do? What are examples of some types of jobs in the field, to give it that sort of practical understanding, I guess, of what a computational biologist does?
Yeah. It's a little bit difficult to sort of pin that down exactly to one thing, because it's such a flexible career. So it could be a whole range of things. And so earlier today I actually went on Seek and did a search for computational biologists and had a look at all the different types of jobs you could do under that heading. And it is really quite varied. So some of the groups were offering employment looking more at statistical genomics. So like, we have big genetic data sets and we need you to develop statistical methods to sort of answer questions. Other job opportunities were much more along the modeling route. So like, can you build us a model which helps us to understand, what's going on, what is going on in the process here that we're interested in. So it really is quite varied, and it depends on the employer as well. So it depends what they're looking for. So it's hard to kind of pin that down to an exact thing that you would be doing this if you become a computational biologist. In some ways, it can be within the spectrum of statistics, biology, and computer science. It can be, almost anything within that crosses any of those, that brings together ideas from any of those 3 topics.
Yeah, okay, interesting. It's a hard one, I guess, as well, because, and it's the way it is across a lot of different multidisciplinary areas. You could take that into any number of those areas in computer science and focus on that part that you've learned, or statistics. That can all be applied to several different companies and organizations that are trying to understand big data sets, a bit like a data scientist, but then you've got that computational biology edge as well that could go into more. Yeah.
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, someone that works in computational biology, I mean, you can guarantee they'll be working with large biological data sets of some sort, and they'll be using or maintaining or writing their own computer algorithms in some computer software language to help analyze that data or help model that data. Exactly which algorithms or which computer languages or which modeling techniques very much depends on the application that it's being used for, but I would say it's definitely going to involve large biological data sets and algorithms or computer software.
We've just had another question come through the chat. Someone's wanting to know about the PhD career outcomes for a computational biologist. So is it important to attain a PhD in order to advance in this field career-wise, do you think? Or are there sort of more, I guess, industry options in the field too?
Yeah, I guess it depends where you want to head long-term. So if your long-term goal is to work at a university and become an academic, then definitely PhD is what you need for that pathway. But if you're looking to head more into industry, then it's not necessary. And that's sort of how this master's was constructed in the first place, as a professional master's. So to gain entrance into being a computational biologist, working in biological labs, analyzing big data, but not necessarily with a PhD. So it's not essential to progress this career if you're headed out into industry.
Great. I've got a question for Lucy now. I was hoping you could give me maybe one of the biggest highlights of your master's program so far.
That's really tricky. Definitely, I've done so much really cool stuff that if I talk to you about it, you'd probably think I was a huge nerd. But you know, I think one of the most exciting things that happened to me was last semester when I was handing in my final report for statistical genomics, advanced statistical genomics. I had a big report, and Kiman Lakau was reading it, and she's kind of like a rock star, like. And she saw one of my figures and she thought it was really cool, and she was like, you know what, this is really cool. I'm going to put it in my software package. That's how cool it is. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that was probably the highlight of my year.
Amazing. Star-studded, you know, like starstruck kind of situation.
Pretty much, yeah.
So we're obviously now dialing in from our homes, and as everyone's probably aware, it's a slightly more unusual time to be studying and talking. So we've got a question that's come through asking you, Lucy, what your subjects are normally like. So what a typical day would be, given that you obviously, you know, have done a large component of your course on campus. I think you can talk a bit about what it would typically be like, but you can also give us a bit of a rundown of what it's working like for you now that you're doing a fair bit of it online as well.
Yeah, so the first year of the MCB, which I kind of did it across my undergrad, is a lot of coursework, and it's really, depending on your background, is quite spread out in terms of, you know, large lectures and, you know, tutorial groups at opposite ends of campus and all that sort of thing. And then as you get into second year, suddenly the class sizes become quite small. And you really get to know your lecturers, and you really sort of get to know sort of who's who in the zoo and all that sort of thing. And then, you know, more recently in third year, I've been doing the internship subject. I've been doing my project, which is, you know, a really small meeting where I'm the only student in the meeting. That, you know, I'm outnumbered in terms of teachers to students. And so it really takes a different shape depending on where you're at. And also, I think, depending on your specialization. So I've never stepped foot in a wet lab, so I wouldn't know what that's like. But I imagine that there's probably room for that if you were to go down a genomics pathway. Yeah.
So perhaps, Jennifer, you could talk a little bit about, you know, is there labs and things like that do take place within the course?
Yeah, so as Lucy said, there's in the first and second year, it's predominantly coursework based. So there's lectures and tutorials or lab-based work. And in the first year, those subjects would be quite large because they would be sort of catering to some other courses as well. But as you get into your second year, they become quite specialized. So some of the units, the subjects that I was mentioning in the slides that I showed earlier were very specific to the computational biology masters. And so the number of students in those get relatively small. And so it really does enable you to make those connections and to hopefully find someone that you could work with for a research project, do an internship with, that sort of thing. Yeah, and then in the final year you get to do this project, which hopefully gives you more connections as to then what you'll do after you've finished.
Great. We're coming into our last 5 minutes. I don't know about you, but this felt like it went quite quickly. And I'm going to pose a question because I think we've gone through all the ones that came through the chat. Just to put you both on the spot, maybe Jennifer, I'll start with you and then hand over to Lucy. If we're obviously talking to potential students right now who are thinking about studying this course, what would be, I guess, your main advice or takeaway for students considering computational biology?
Well, I think my advice would be that this Master of Computational Biology trains you in skills which are very transferable. So the skills that you get in computation, in computer science and coding are very transferable to other fields. The understanding of mathematics and statistics is also very transferable. So it's really building those skills which you could take, into an academic career, or you can take into an industry career in computational biology. But it's also a very flexible training, which would enable you to take another career path if you end up, deciding that's what you want to do later on. So, and it also gives you training across these 3 different areas of biology, computer science, and statistics, and that's a very unique opportunity to be able to fit that all into just a single degree.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why it benefits from being 3 years. You actually have the time to get a lot more technical and advanced scientific understanding crammed into that master's than you maybe would through, those 1-2 year degrees that you can do as well. So there is a reason it's a 3-year master's for sure. What about you, Lucy? Do you have any sort of takeaway advice or anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I guess if I was talking to myself before I started computational biology and the whole pathway, I'd probably tell myself to have a bit of an open mind, because I really approached it thinking that I wanted to be, a mathematician, and that would be the only thing I'd be interested in. But as it turns out, I really, really love coding, and I now have lots of friends in the computer science sort of space at the University of Melbourne that I wouldn't have had if I hadn't chosen this pathway. So yeah, I think it's really important to keep an open mind. Even though I'm not studying genomics at the moment, I've really enjoyed the time that I've spent studying it, and definitely a lot of those skills I can think of are very, very transferable to what I'm studying now. And so it's interesting seeing how all of these things sort of overlap and come together, even though they're kind of different, and sometimes it feels like they're they're so different, they're like chalk and cheese, but actually I combine them all the time. So yeah.
Excellent. I think you both did wonders with that question that I've totally put you on the spot for, so thank you so much. So we're at time now. Unfortunately, we're going to have to go, but I just want to thank Jen, you so much, and Lucy, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to me and everyone who's attended today. Also, big thank you to our audience for posing some great questions in the chat. And just a reminder that you can access this webinar. It'll be recorded. So if you've, trying to visually take notes throughout the series, don't worry too much. You can come back and watch and listen to all of the expert advice that you've heard today again. If you have any further questions that do pop up in the next few days or weeks, you can always submit them to our website. That's study.unimelb.edu.au, and one of our staff members will respond to you as soon as we can. So thanks again so much, everyone. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Jen. I hope everyone has a lovely rest of their day and stays safe.